Absolutely. I think I always kind of fell in early on to the film, I guess, the eyeball test kind of guy when I first started playing, wasn't really producing my own content. I just kind of like to watch the players, and I've become almost addicted to the stats now. Like I definitely like both. I especially like when the stats inform the what I'm seeing on tape. And so I'm totally with you. Like if you can get a leg up in any which way, whichever way you're getting the information, it's always a good leg up. That all being said, though, like, I feel like the industry is getting definitely, there's tons and tons of information, whether it's a different type of predictive stat and whatnot. And you know, we just obviously reference Barrett a lot. He likes to call it kind of the noise, right? There's tons of stuff out there. What do you kind of take on this wealth of information? Like, and is there certain things that you really truly trust, or stats that you just feel like that much more factors, whatever it might be? Like, what do you think is the truest or strongest indicators of fantasy value?
Sure. I mean, we live in this, this space now in fantasy. Back when I started in like 2012 or 2013, I can just remember, I mean, that was back when people thought that, you had to be 6'3" and 230 pounds to play wide receiver, and that running backs still mattered, and like you had to run the ball to win games in the NFL. And I think the fantasy space has done a lot to prove and kind of push narratives. But now we've gotten to a point where and this is kind of a blessing and a curse. Like we've gotten to a point now where charting data and the analytics in the community has just gotten so much better and so much stronger that people are looking into or looking a little too deeply into the details. Like I can remember back, like I said, 2012, 2013, when I first started doing this, like the idea of getting Jimmy Garoppolo's play action passing numbers at that time I would have sold. I don't even know, like the amount of money that I would have paid to get that type of information back then. And Pro Football Focus had it, but like, it's become a lot more readily available. And now I think we've gotten to a point where, because there's so much information readily available, I think the best models and the best statistical projections that you can make are the most simple ones. And in fantasy football, the only thing that really matters, like I can sit here and talk to you about how running backs look, how I think their traits will translate to the next level. I can sit here and wax poetic all day about that. But at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters is opportunity. And if your projections are not centered around who's going to be getting the ball and at what parts of the field, if your model and your projection system does not start around those two key facts, then you probably need to go back to the drawing board. Scott talks about the noise a lot. Like I read Nate Silver's Signal and Noise front to back a couple years ago. I read I read Nassim Taleb like religiously, and I read Anti-Fragile front to back in college. And like the biggest thing that I've taken away from like reading people that are way smarter than I am at building projections and modeling into the future is that like usually the fewer the inputs, the better. But you want to make sure that those inputs that you're putting into the model actually matter. And for fantasy, to me, like the lifeblood of scoring for both receivers and running backs, if you're playing in a PPR league, are targets. And if you're not trying to find every way possible to predict who's going to get the ball and at what points on the field, then like I said, you probably need to go back to the drawing board, because opportunity is really the main core of the game that we play.
Absolutely, yeah. I think, Barrett, too, is such an innovator in that, where he calls them the metrics that matter that he did at PFF. I'm sure he's going to bring a ton of that work to fantasy points as well. The bell cow index or the target hog, and trying to pick all that out. So totally agree. If you're not starting with the opportunity, you can have all the talent in the world, but if you're rotting on the bench, what does it matter? And then there's all those factors that go into the opportunity. Is the surrounding talent around it quality enough that you're going to have the scoring chances? What is that volume? The quality usage might be higher than the sheer volume at times, and there are factors, but if you're not getting the touches, none of those things will even matter in the long run. So to totally get that